Hello children, welcome to today's English class. I hope you all are safe, healthy and happy at home. Children, do you remember what we had learnt in our last class? We had learnt chapter 9 of your prose text, Madam Rides the Bus. I hope you might have read the chapter carefully at home and also tried to look at the word meanings, and you might have also tried to write down the question answers, as writing is also equally important. And as these days you are going to your schools for your doubt clearing sessions, so you can clear your doubts from your teachers in the school. Okay? I hope you are enjoying learning lessons with me. Today we will be learning chapter 10 of your prose text, the sermon at Benares. Children, before we move on to the lesson, let us try to understand what is the meaning of sermon. You might have come across this word in many religious places, or you might have heard from your elders, or you might have also got an opportunity to listen to sermons in different places. For example, in church, in mosque, or in temples, or any other religious meetings. And different religious leaders or saints or people who are spiritually enlightened deliver sermons in different places on different occasions to educate us, to provide us spiritual education and also to lead us to the right path. You might have also heard about Lord Buddha. You might have read about Buddha in your history textbook in class 8, isn't it? You might have also learnt about the teachings of Buddhism, teachings of Buddha, and you might also remember them. Why I am talking to you about Buddha, you might wonder, because it is related to our chapter today. Today we are going to learn how Gautam Buddha delivered his first sermon at Benares. What was it about? Children, we all know that Buddha was born in a royal family, and as a prince he enjoyed a luxurious life. He was kept away from the sufferings of the world. But one day when he was on his way to hunting, he saw 4 different events, or he experienced the sufferings of 4 different people, which really brought a transformation in his life. Now let us see what are those 4 events that forced him to renounce his royal life, his life in the palace, comfortable life, and made him move in search of the truth, the divine knowledge, and how he was enlightened and how he became the great teacher, the divine teacher or the spiritual educator, and what was the first sermon that he delivered in Benares. So let us move on to the lesson. You can open your textbook, page 133, and look into your textbook very carefully, or you can even look at the screen and listen attentively as we try to understand the lesson. The sermon at Benares. Gautama Buddha, 563 BC, that is before Christ, to 483 BC, began life as a prince named Siddhartha Gautama in northern India. At 12, he was sent away for schooling in the Hindu sacred scriptures, and 4 years later he returned home to marry a princess. They had a son and lived for 10 years as befitted royalty. Befitted means as it was appropriate for the royal family, and heretofore shielded from the sufferings of the world. While out hunting, chanced upon a sick man, then an aged man, then a funeral procession, and finally a monk begging for alms. Children, here alms means charity or the food or money given to poor people. Okay. So, Gautama Buddha was known as Siddhartha Gautama, and he belonged to the North India, and when he was 12 years old, he was sent by his parents for schooling to learn the Hindu sacred scriptures. Okay. And after 4 years, he returned home and married a princess, and they had a son and lived happily for 10 years. And when he was 25 years old, and as I told you, he was kept away from all sufferings till then. And one day, he came across by chance 4 different events, sufferings of the world, while he was on his way to hunting. So, what were the 4 different things that he observed that made him really sad? The first was he came across a sick man, and then an aged man, and a funeral procession. Funeral procession, when a person dies, the way his last rites are performed and he is taken to the grave. And then he also saw a monk begging for alms. So, these were the 4 different events in Buddha's life that really made him sad, because till he was 25 years of age, he was very comfortable and led a royal life, and he was kept away from all sufferings. He never knew what were sufferings and what was it to undergo suffering, because he was a prince. Now, let us see what happened after that. So, these sights moved him so much that he at once went out into the world to seek enlightenment. Enlightenment here is a state of high spiritual knowledge. Okay? A person's elevation to a spiritual personality. Okay? And he was very much concerned about the sorrows he had witnessed, he had seen. He wandered for 7 years and finally sat down under a peepal tree, where he vowed to stay until enlightenment came. Enlightened after 7 days, he renamed the tree the Bodhi tree, tree of wisdom, and began to teach and to share his new understandings. At that point, he became known as the Buddha, the awakened or the enlightened. Okay? So, when he saw all these 4 different events in his life, okay, he left his home, his palace and all the comforts, and he went out in search of enlightenment. Okay. That means he wanted to gain spiritual knowledge. Okay. And for 7 years he wandered here means to move in an aimless way, because he was in search of enlightenment. And after 7 years, finally he came to a tree, that is the Bodhi tree, which was renamed as the tree of wisdom, and under that tree he was there, okay, for 7 days. And after 7 days, he began to teach and to share his new understandings. And from then he was known as the awakened or the enlightened Buddha. So, after wandering for 7 years and after being enlightened, so after 7 days he renamed the tree as the tree of wisdom. Okay. He named the tree the Bodhi tree, okay, and he started to share the divine knowledge, the spiritual knowledge which he had gained, and he started sharing this spiritual knowledge with people. Now the Buddha preached. Here preached means to deliver a religious talk, okay, to a group of people. So the Buddha preached his first sermon at the city of Benares, most holy of the dipping places on the river Ganges. We all know that Benares is a holy city. That sermon has been preserved and is given here. It reflects the Buddha's wisdom about one inscrutable kind of suffering. Inscrutable means something which cannot be understood. And what was that? Kisa Gotami had an only son and he died. In her grief, she carried the dead child to all her neighbors, asking them for medicine. And the people said, she has lost her senses. The boy is dead. At length, Kisa Gotami met a man who replied to her request. I cannot give thee medicine for thy child, but I know a physician who can. Sermon, children, as I told you, it's a religious or moral talk. Okay? And this particular lady, Kisa Gotami, what happened to her? Her only son had died and she was not ready to accept his death. So what did she do? In grief, she carried the dead child to all her neighbors and she demanded for medicine to cure him. So the people thought, she is out of senses, she is not in her senses, and that is why she is behaving like this, carrying her dead son and asking for medicines. Finally, she went to a person who replied to her. Now, what did he say? He said, I cannot give thee medicine. Thee means here you, and thy, your. So he said, I cannot give you medicine for your child, but I know somebody, who can do that. Now, let us see who was that physician. And the girl said, pray tell me, sir, who is it? And the man replied, go to Sakya Muni, the Buddha. Kisa Gotami repaired to the Buddha and cried. Repaired here means went. She went to the Buddha and cried, Lord and Master, give me the medicine that will cure my boy. The Buddha answered, I want a handful of mustard seed. And when the girl in her joy promised to procure it, the Buddha added, the mustard seed must be taken from a house where no one has lost a child, husband, parent, or anybody in the family. Okay, procure means to get or to obtain, especially with great care and effort. So the girl was very happy, when she heard that, I'll send you to somebody who can give you medicine for your child. So she prayed, so please tell me who is the man. So he said, you go to the Buddha, the Sakya Muni. And she went to the Buddha and asked him to give medicine that would cure her boy. And the Buddha said, okay, you get me a handful of mustard seed. And the girl was so happy, I just need to get a handful of mustard seed and my boy will be cured. But the Buddha stopped her and said, the mustard seed must be brought from a house where nobody has died till now. Nobody in the family, father, mother or parent, husband, grandparents or child, nobody should have died in that family. So I want mustard seeds from that particular house. So children, aren't you curious to know whether she got the mustard seeds? Let us find out. Poor Kisa Gautami now went from house to house, and the people pitied her and said, "Here is mustard seed, take it." But when she asked, "Did a son or daughter, a father or mother die in your family?" they answered her, "Alas, the living are few, but the dead are many. Do not remind us of our deepest grief. And there was no house, but some beloved one had died in it." Pitied here means children to feel sorrow. Now this poor girl went from house to house, and the people pitied her, they felt so sorry for her that she is asking mustard seed. So they said, "Take it." Oh, there's no big deal, giving mustard seeds. But when she asked, "Did somebody die in your house? A father, a mother, or anybody, a daughter, a son?" So what was the reply she got? They said, "The living are few, but the dead are more. So please don't remind us of our dear ones whom we have lost." So there was no house where nobody had not, where nobody had not died. Okay? So every house people had more of dead people or more of people who had died in the family than the living persons. And so what happened to Kisa Gautami? She became weary. Weary means she became tired and hopeless, moving from house to house. And so finally she sat down at the wayside watching the lights of the city as they flickered and then were extinguished again. Okay? As they flickered and then got extinguished. So she just observed the lights. At last, the darkness of the night reigned everywhere. Reigned here means to rule as a monarch, means everywhere the night or the darkness had taken control. As the night approached, there was darkness everywhere. And she considered the fate of men, that their lives flicker up and are extinguished again. And she thought to herself, "How selfish am I in my grief? Death is common to all. Yet in this valley of desolation," desolation means a state of complete destruction, "there is a path that leads him to immortality who has suffered all selfishness." Children, immortality or immortal. So you need to know two words here, mortal and immortal. Okay? Immortal means that is going to remain forever, last forever, and mortal means that is going to stay for a short period and that is going to end after some time. So men are mortal. Okay? Nature is immortal. For example, you might have read in many of the poems of Keats about mortality of men and immortality of nature. The brook, the trees, the mountains, the springs. Okay? So when Kisa Gautami became very tired and she was observing the lights flickering and then being extinguished, she had learnt a great lesson of life. And what was the lesson she learned, children? She started realizing that it was selfish on her part, to demand that her dead son should be alive again. So she learnt about a truth that death is common to all, because she could not find a single house where nobody has not died, where people had not died. Okay. So, she said that death is common to all, and yet there is a path that leads man to immortality who has surrendered all selfishness. That means, she said, if we are not selfish and if we learn the truth of life, okay, if we surrender ourselves to the will of God, then we have attained immortality. That was what she learnt. The Buddha said, the life of mortals in this world, mortals means, as I told you, that is bound to die, that is not going to remain forever. The life of mortals in this world is troubled and brief and combined with pain, for there is not any means by which those that have been born can avoid dying. After reaching old age, there is death. Of such a nature are living beings. As ripe fruits are early in danger of falling, so mortals when born are always in danger of death. As all earthen vessels made by the potter end in being broken, so is the life of mortals, both young and adult, both those who are fools and those who are wise, all fall into the power of death. Okay? All of those who overcome by death depart from life. A father cannot save his son, nor kinsmen their relations. Mark, while relatives are looking on and lamenting deeply, one by one mortals are carried off like an ox that is led to the slaughter. So the world is afflicted with death and decay. Therefore, the wise do not grieve, knowing the terms of the world. Here, lamenting means, children, to express passionate grief about, to be pained, and afflicted here means affected by pain or suffering or disease. So, now let us go back to what Buddha said. He talks about the mortality of human beings. He says, when we are born in this world, we have to die one day. We are going to die. We cannot escape death. Everybody has to die. And when we are in this world, we have to face pain, sufferings. Okay, we cannot do away with that. He says we cannot avoid death. And he says that is the nature of human beings. And here he gives two examples, to make this lady understand about the reality of life, that we cannot escape death. First, he talks about the ripe fruits. He says the fruits that are ripe, they are more in danger of falling down. The raw fruits do not fall down from trees easily, isn't it, children? You might have observed. The ripe fruits, they fall down very quickly. So, it is quite natural that when the fruits are ripe, they would fall down. Nobody can stop them from falling down. So, this was one example he gave, and the second example that Buddha gave was of earthen vessels. The earthen vessels, if we drop them, they would break very easily. How much ever careful you are, they are bound to break. The potter makes it with so much of hard work and he does that so meticulously, so carefully, but in the end they do break, isn't it? You might have seen your mother using earthen vessels at home, and you might have also seen them breaking so easily. You drop them and they break. So, these are the two examples he gives of the ripe fruits and of the earthen vessels. He says, so is the life of human beings. We are born in this world and then we have to face death one day, just like the ripe fruits and the earthen pots. So, he says human beings, whether they are young, they are adult, they are old, all those who are fools, those who are wise, fall into the power of death. And also Buddha says, all those who overcome by death, they depart from this life. And he says, when we are in this world, a father cannot save his son, a father cannot save his dead son. He is helpless, nor kinsmen their relations. Nobody can save their dear ones when they are dead. They are helpless before death. So, Buddha said, while relatives are looking on and lamenting deeply, one by one mortals are carried off. Again he gives the example of an ox that is taken for being slaughtered by the butcher. Okay? Can the ox help? No, the ox becomes helpless when it is taken to the butcher for being slaughtered. Okay? So, he says the world is afflicted with death. The pain of death must be experienced by each and every human being. Nobody can escape death. So, he says people who are wise, that means people who have understood the reality of life, they do not grieve, because they know that we are immortal. Okay? The wise know that human beings are immortal. So, there is no use lamenting or being pained by death. So, children, this was the first sermon delivered by Lord Buddha to Kissa Gautami in Benares, and this was the reality of life which not only Kissa Gautami, but we all need to understand, that we are mortal, we are not immortal. Okay? And nobody can save us from death. We all must face death in this world and move to the next world after death. And while we are in this world, we all have to undergo sufferings. Sufferings are part of our life. Okay? So, Kissa Gautami learned the reality of life, and the sermon that was delivered by Lord Buddha to her, and this particular sermon was an eye opener for her, and it made her realize that how selfish she was. We have learnt that we must not be selfish. While we are in this world, we need to be selfless and serve humankind. So, I hope children you have understood the lesson. I would request you to read the lesson carefully once again at home and go through the word meanings given in the textbook, and also look at the question answers. Try to make notes give headings to each paragraph of the lesson, so that you can understand the lesson better. In the next class, I will see you with a new topic. Until then, take care, stay safe, stay at home.